It was the tallest machine by far, reaching as high as a small office building. While the assembler was a single unit, the system was composed of multiple lifters and hefty arms. They allowed a single person or an AI routine to put together a mech without relying on any other manpower. Modern assemblers were the cornerstone of boutique industries. They made it possible for craftsmen to economically compete against giant mass producers. Mass production remained the most cost and resource-efficient mode of production, but small-scale manufacturers could more easily tailor their individual products to their customers. The huge transgalactic corporations had tried to offer the same customization by incorporating assemblers into their factories, but they had never come close to achieving the same quality. Vez owned a cheap, run-of-the-mill assembler that was nowhere near its prime. Like his 3D printer, the assembler showed some signs of use and repair. There was a danger that self-made repairs by previous owners could cause an issue in the system, but the machine wasn't advanced enough for that. Vez didn't think he needed to be too concerned, especially after he had completed the necessary checks to ensure it was still in working condition. Damn, I've already spent 6 days on this. I only have 2 left to put the mech together. That was the same amount of time it took to produce the entire Mark Antony on Iron Spirit. He hoped that as he familiarized himself with his equipment, he could speed up the production process to match that time in the real universe. But that will happen later. For now, slow and steady wins the race. From a jumbled pile of components, the mech slowly came to life. Vez started putting together its internal frame, which formed its skeleton. It was the simplest part of the assembly process, as the components were built like a jigsaw puzzle, with each piece snapping together easily. Once the skeleton was fixed into place, Vez started to add the essential organs to the frame. The engines, power reactor, energy cells, sensors, and the all-important cockpit were put in one by one. They fit into their assigned places like a glove. The trickiest part of the assembly process came when Vez installed the cabling. Though not as difficult as doing it for the Caesar Augustus, he sometimes had to resort to pushing or hammering certain sections into place. This is not supposed to happen at all. I guess it was wishful thinking to hope my 3D printer would produce all the parts perfectly. It wouldn't have been much of an issue if 1 or 2 parts had come out 1/4 of an inch thicker. But if multiple sections had started to exhibit variations in their dimensions, a chain reaction of misalignment would have been set off when he started to put them all together. Fortunately for Vez, the deviations were within an acceptable range, although he did have to force a few pieces in here and there. He managed to fit all the components together fairly well. Maybe it's not a bad thing that this mech isn't an exact replica of its blueprint. The variations make it unique, just like each and every human. A lot of fabricators hated any sort of deviation or inconsistency, and Vez knew that if the majority of the parts were defective, he would never be able to sell it. But in the grand scheme of things, he didn't think it was so bad to include a little bit of harmless eccentricity in his mech. After making sure the components still worked at peak efficiency, Vez moved on to the armor. The countless robotic arms of the assembler picked up pieces of plating and carefully aligned them before installing them in their designated places. Special screws and adhesives kept them in place. He also put together the mech's default armaments, the mace and heavy tower shield. Assembling the latter was a tiresome ordeal due to the sheer number of plates stacked onto one piece. The final components were installed toward the end of the second day. Vez let out a sigh of relief as he hit the button to initiate the painter module of the assembler. He was far too tired to coat and paint the mech's outer layer by himself. He didn't care too much if the coating wasn't all that great. The painting took a few hours, but the advanced coating dried quickly. Finally, the mech was complete. Vez had spent many hours imagining its appearance, and now its dark and intimidating form loomed over him in the real universe. Vez felt an unprecedented surge of pride and satisfaction swell deep inside him. His dream had come true. He had fabricated a mech of his own design with his own 2 hands. He had spent 8 days pouring his heart into it, infusing its production with not only his focus, but also his love. His eyes filled with tears as he admired the armored mech's domineering contours. He refused to believe anybody could approach it and not be affected by its presence. "You're like my first child, and you deserve a name that fits your pedigree. I'm going to call you Phoenix Cry." It was considered taboo for a mech designer to give his mech such a personal name. It was usually the pilot who named their mech after they had spent some time getting accustomed to it. But Vez had been caught up in his emotions and had decided to name it in the spur of the moment. He hoped the client wouldn't mind too much and would keep the name. Technically, the mech was complete and fully functional, but Vez wanted to give it one final gift. It was something he had included in the blueprints, but it had only ever been a fake version. He got into the assembler's mobile lift. Lucky had spent the last 8 days by Vez's side and had watched him closely as he had worked. A hint of curiosity flashed across his eyes, and he followed Vez into the lift. They ascended to the mech's chest, and Vez opened the cockpit. The interior looked fresh and sterile. He hopped into the cramped area and sat down on the synthetic, cushioned surface of the bespoke seat. For a brief moment, he imagined what it would be like to connect to the neural interface and pilot the Phoenix Cry himself. He visualized screens coming to life around him as he piloted the mech through a fierce battle. He quickly snapped out of it. "I'm not a potentate. My fate will never be to battle on the front line." His heart was filled with sadness, and it threatened to overcome all feelings of jubilation. But he managed to keep his negative emotions in check. His inability to pilot was an old regret, and not one worth revisiting. Instead, he put a hand in his pocket and retrieved a dark red carnelian gemstone. Its subtle gradient made it look like a drop of blood, inspiring a sense of vitality and passion. He could think of no better gem to crown his first creation. Lucky meowed at the sight of his old excretion and pawed at it playfully. "Do you recognize it? You crapped this out when you were at the hotel. If the cleaning staff hadn't told me about it, I might have missed it." Vez had accumulated a nice stockpile of gems, but most of them provided marginal benefits at a very obscure magnitude. But this particular gem clearly outshone everything else Lucky had previously produced, and Vez didn't really know why. He hadn't fed Lucky any notable minerals except what the hotel had provided as an additional service. He wondered whether the cat had been excited by the crowded, tech-filled environment. The gem had a lot of attributes that made it well suited for the Phoenix Cry, and the color matched perfectly. Vez used his hand tools to extract the generic red stone in the middle of the dashboard, which functioned as the mech's power button. He put the carnelian in its place and fixed it securely in its fitting. After he had finished, Vez leaned back in the chair and admired how the lustrous gem attracted the eye. He inspected it yet again. "Carnelian of focus increases the pilot's concentration by 0.1 when installed on a mech." This was a particularly unique attribute. Unlike the other gemstones Lucky had dropped, it improved the skill of the pilot rather than the mech. Vez had no idea how that worked, but he did know it was a valuable boost, although it wasn't a game changer by any standard. It served to improve the pilot's impression of the Phoenix Cry, while also giving them a minor edge, which could prove useful in a tough battle. As this attribute was applied to the pilot, Vez would be able to hide its benefits from the MTA, something he couldn't do if he were to use Lucky's other stones. That was because he wouldn't have any reasonable explanation for how a mech was able to move 0.5% faster, or how it could withstand lasers 1% better than the HRF plating was designed to take on. Vez would need to acquire better skills before he could camouflage those mech-focused benefits. Until then, he would have to stick to subtle gemstones and keep the ones with material benefits for later use. Enough daydreaming. It's time to get this mech ready to sell. First up, I'll have to certify the Phoenix Cry.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.